Have you ever looked around and wondered why it seems like the worst people often rise to the top? Why do liars, manipulators, narcissists, and those with the least empathy seem to gain the most influence? It feels backwards, unfair, even absurd. But what if it isn't a flaw in the system? What if it is the system? Friedrich Nietzsche, the razor-sharp philosopher who stared into the heart of human nature and didn't blink, offered a disturbing but profound insight. Power isn't just about virtue or talent. It's about will. Society loves to tell us that good people win in the end, that kindness is strength, that merit rises. But when you really examine history and human behavior, a different picture emerges. Those who succeed are often not the most moral, but the most willing. Willing to dominate. Willing to deceive. Willing to impose their will on the world. Nietzsche saw this clearly. In his view, morality wasn't objective. It was a tool. And the people who understood that, who used it strategically rather than followed it blindly, were the ones who shaped the world. He called this the will to power, the fundamental drive behind human behavior. Not just the desire to survive or reproduce, but the deep primal urge to assert oneself, to grow, to overcome, to dominate. This changes everything. The people we label as bad may simply be those who refuse to play by society's rules. Rules which, Nietzsche argued, were designed by the weak to control the strong. Morality, especially Christian morality in his time, was less about truth and more about taming. Think about that for a second. What if what we call evil is often just unfiltered ambition? What if goodness is often just obedience in disguise? This flips our entire moral compass upside down, and it explains why, time and again, those who defy conventional morality rise faster than those who conform. In the modern world, we're taught to be polite, humble, selfless. But in Nietzsche's world, which is really our world under a different lens, those traits are survival mechanisms of the powerless. The powerful play a different game. But does that mean we should celebrate cruelty? Glorify manipulation? Not necessarily. Nietzsche wasn't trying to justify evil. He was trying to expose the truth. The raw truth most of us don't want to hear, that power is rarely moral, and morality is rarely powerful. So when we ask why the worst people succeed, Nietzsche would flip the question, are they the worst, or are they simply unafraid of the truth that others deny? Power is not some sterile attribute handed out based on fairness. It's messy, it's psychological, it's tribal. In every hierarchy, from schoolyards to governments, there's a constant struggle, not for truth, but for dominance. And those who master the appearance of strength often defeat those who possess substance. This is why someone with unwavering certainty, even if entirely wrong, can influence the masses more than someone with a nuanced, well-reasoned insight. Because conviction feels like strength. And strength, in human psychology, trumps subtlety every time. Nietzsche understood this dynamic. He didn't endorse it. But he believed ignoring it was even more dangerous. And here's the most unsettling part. Many of the traits we associate with bad leaders, ruthlessness, arrogance, deception, are not bugs. They're features. In a game designed around perception and power, those who are unencumbered by doubt move faster. They play harder, and they win more. Meanwhile, the thoughtful, the kind, the introspective often hesitate. They question themselves. They care about consequences. And in a power game, hesitation is weakness. This doesn't mean all hope is lost for the good, but it means they have to understand the terrain. Power isn't granted to those who deserve it. It's taken by those who demand it. And if you're unwilling to claim it, someone else will. If the will to power is the engine, then morality is the steering wheel. But who's actually driving? Nietzsche introduced the concept of slave morality and master morality to explain the strange way societies define good and evil. It's one of his most powerful and most misunderstood ideas. Master morality comes from those who are strong, confident, and self-affirming. For them, good means power, beauty, strength, vitality. It's about affirming life and asserting oneself. There is no shame in greatness. Slave morality, on the other hand, emerges from the weak, the oppressed, the resentful. It flips the values of the powerful on their head. The strong are now labeled as evil. The humble, the meek, the obedient are declared good. Sound familiar? Nietzsche argued that Christianity played a huge role in this inversion. In a world dominated by Roman strength and aristocratic pride, Christianity offered a radical new message: the meek shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the poor, turn the other cheek. To Nietzsche, this wasn't a moral awakening. It was resentment in disguise. The weak, unable to win by the rules of strength, created new rules. Rules where their powerlessness became a virtue. It was psychological warfare, and it worked. But there was a cost. In suppressing the will to power, in demonizing ambition, society began to rot from the inside. Mediocrity was elevated. Excellence became suspicious. And over time, a deep unease settled in, a sense that something vital had been lost. Nietzsche called this the decline of culture, the fall of man's instinctual vitality, a slow suicide of the spirit. And yet, even in a world built on slave morality, the will to power doesn't vanish. It just goes underground. It mutates, it becomes passive-aggressive, it hides behind rules, laws, bureaucracies, institutions. That's how we end up with systems where cruelty is coded into policy, ambition wears a mask of humility, and manipulation is called marketing. The worst people succeed not because they break the rules, but because they understand what the rules really are: performances, and they perform better than anyone. Slave morality is seductive because it flatters the masses. It tells the majority that they are morally superior simply because they are not in power. It turns suffering into sainthood. But Nietzsche saw this as dangerous, because in elevating victimhood, we discourage strength. We teach people to resent achievement rather than pursue it, and perhaps most dangerously, we internalize guilt. Deep thinkers and creators often self-censor because their drive clashes with society's celebration of humility and sacrifice. This creates a world where those who could uplift humanity stay silent, while the loudest voices are often the least insightful. Nietzsche wanted us to wake up, to see that morality wasn't handed down from the heavens. It was shaped by human struggle, by power dynamics, by resentment. And unless we recognize this, we remain puppets, performing values that were designed to keep us in our place. So what's the alternative? Nietzsche didn't want chaos. He wanted authenticity. He wanted a world where people crafted their own values based on their strengths, their insights, their passions. He called this the creation of the Übermensch, the overman, not a tyrant, but someone who rises above herd mentality and dares to live fully. And that journey starts with recognizing that success, as we define it, is often a mirror of our fears, not our virtues. To understand why the worst people succeed, we have to confront a deeper tension, one that goes beyond morality and power. It's the tension between the individual and the herd, between authenticity and conformity, between those who think for themselves and those who think in groups. Nietzsche believed that most people don't really live. They follow. They adapt. They submit to whatever norms keep them safe. He called this the herd instinct, the primal need to belong, to be accepted, to avoid standing out. And while this instinct is ancient and necessary for survival, it comes with a cost. It crushes the individual. In the herd, values are not discovered. They're inherited. Beliefs are not questioned. They're absorbed. People cling to what's familiar, not what's true. The result? A society that favors comfort over courage, obedience over originality. Now consider this. If most people are operating under herd instinct, then what kind of person breaks free? What kind of person rises above the mass and says, "No, I will not live on my knees"? It's usually the one who is willing to defy, to disturb, to disrupt. And that person often looks like a threat to the herd. That's why leaders, creators, rebels, even geniuses are so often misunderstood, vilified, or feared. But here's where it gets more complicated. Not everyone who rises above the herd does so nobly. Some do it manipulatively. They recognize that the herd wants safety more than truth, and they exploit that. They feed people illusions. They echo back their fears. They present themselves as saviors while serving only their own ambition. In Nietzsche's world, these are not evil people in the traditional sense. They are simply the ones who understand the rules of the game and play to win. Remember, the herd doesn't want to be challenged. It wants to be reassured. It wants leaders who reflect its own values back at it, whether or not those values lead anywhere meaningful. That's why charisma often beats competence, certainty beats nuance, and populism beats philosophy. The herd wants someone who tells them what they already believe, only louder. Nietzsche feared this dynamic because he knew what it led to: mediocrity enshrined as morality, real wisdom replaced by slogans, power handed to those who speak the language of the crowd, not the language of truth. And yet, Nietzsche didn't hate the herd, he pitied it. He saw it as lost, not evil. Its instinct to belong was understandable, but without awareness, it becomes dangerous. Because once the herd turns on you, it doesn't just disagree, it devours. Ask yourself this: have you ever bitten your tongue in a conversation because you knew the truth wouldn't be welcomed? Have you ever watched someone be attacked, not for being wrong, but for being different? This is the herd instinct in action, the desire to keep everyone in line, even if the line leads nowhere. So how do the worst people succeed? Because they play both sides. They pretend to be part of the herd while secretly bending it to their will. They exploit the fear of standing out while never being afraid to stand above. Nietzsche believed that only a rare kind of person could resist this pressure, someone he called the free spirit. This isn't a romantic ideal, it's a psychological rebellion, a person who thinks outside the timeline of their culture, who dares to question not just what people believe, but why they believe it. The free spirit lives without apology, without dogma, without the approval of the herd. And because of that, they're dangerous. Not because they seek to destroy, but because they threaten to awaken. And let's be clear, awakening is not always welcomed. Most people don't want truth, they want comfort. They don't want to be shaken, they want to be lulled. And so, when someone speaks with real insight, it often provokes hostility. The herd sees it as arrogance, as rebellion, as heresy. This is why Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." The free spirit finds their why not in conformity, but in overcoming. But the world doesn't reward this easily. It resists, it retaliates. Which brings us to a tragic irony. Those who could most improve the world are often the ones most rejected by it, while those who manipulate the herd often rise to the top, cloaked in the language of leadership but driven by the hunger for control. Nietzsche didn't offer simple solutions. He wasn't writing a manual for success. He was sounding an alarm. If we allow ourselves to be ruled by herd instinct, we will always choose the safe lie over the dangerous truth. And the worst people, the liars, the tyrants, the demagogues, they understand this. They thrive in it. So what's the answer? It starts with seeing, with waking up to the patterns, with recognizing when comfort is being sold as virtue, when sameness is being packaged as safety, when truth is being drowned out by noise. Nietzsche wanted us to be warriors, not with weapons, but with awareness. Warriors of thought, of self, of values that come from within, not imposed from above. To resist the herd is not to hate it, but to outgrow it. To guide it, maybe, but never to become it. And in doing so, we may find a new kind of power. Not the hollow success of manipulation, but the deeper strength of becoming who we truly are. If power is the game and morality is the script, then what are we really watching? Nietzsche might say, it's a performance, a grand play of appearances, where masks matter more than faces. This is not just a metaphor. Nietzsche believed that society trains people to wear moral masks, to appear kind, humble, fair, not necessarily to be those things, but to signal them. And in a world obsessed with appearances, the performance often becomes more important than the person. So ask yourself, how many people do you know who present an image of virtue, yet act out of self-interest? How many leaders preach integrity while climbing on the backs of others? How many corporations speak of values while chasing only profit? This is not new. Nietzsche saw it everywhere in his own time. He believed modern culture was drenched in hypocrisy, people saying one thing and doing another. And the worst part, they believed their own act. He called this self-deception. Not just lying to others, but lying to yourself. Convincing yourself that your conformity is morality, that your obedience is wisdom, that your cowardice is compassion. According to Nietzsche, this disconnection between who we are and who we pretend to be is the true sickness of modern life. And those who master the mask, who manipulate it consciously, rise fastest, not because they are wiser, but because they understand the audience. And what is the audience? the herd, the collective, the mass of people who judge based not on depth, but on signals, who reward those who appear virtuous, not those who are more moved by confidence than truth. This is why so many politicians, influencers, and thought leaders succeed. They are not deep thinkers, they are stage actors. They read the crowd, they mirror back its desires, and they do it with enough flair to be admired. Nietzsche would say, they have perfected the moral costume. And here lies the danger. When morality becomes a costume, truth becomes irrelevant. Sincerity becomes optional. What matters is performance, surface, optics. This is not just dangerous, it's devastating. Because when we elevate those who are best at pretending, we end up with leaders who lack substance, with cultures that prioritize branding over being, with societies that confuse virtue with visibility. And in this theater of masks, those who remove theirs, who speak plainly, who act authentically, are seen as strange, dangerous, even offensive. Nietzsche was no stranger to rejection. His ideas were dismissed, ridiculed, ignored in his own lifetime, not because they were incoherent, but because they were too honest, too raw, too unmasked. He knew that honesty is a threat in a world built on illusion. So what does this mean for us? It means that the path to authentic power is not through imitation. It's through confrontation, first with ourselves. Nietzsche believed that true growth begins by facing what we've buried, our desires, our fears, our capacity for both cruelty and greatness. He called this the process of becoming who you are, not who you're told to be, not who you're trained to be, but who you already are beneath the layers of shame, guilt, and conditioning. It's not easy. The masks are comfortable. They're accepted. They keep you safe, but they also keep you small. And here's where the worst people gain their edge. They abandon the mask selectively, not fully, but enough to seize power. They understand the role, but they're not trapped by it. They know when to drop the smile, when to twist the truth, when to shift the script. The authentic individual who refuses to play this game often loses in the short term. They're called difficult, arrogant, rebellious, but over time, if they persist, they may forge something rare, a life of actual depth, not performative virtue, but inner strength. This is the path of the Übermensch, the one who does not wear the mask but creates their own identity, who does not borrow values but builds them, who does not conform but transcends. And the key, Nietzsche believed, was self-overcoming, the ability to look into your own shadow, your own contradictions, and rise above them, not by rejecting them, but by integrating them, by owning them, because only then can you be free from the need to perform. So, in a world where the worst succeed through deception, Nietzsche challenges us to succeed through transformation. To wear no mask, not because it's safe, because it's real. If the masks of morality hide our true nature, what lies beneath them? For Nietzsche, the answer was both liberating and terrifying. There is no absolute good or evil. These categories, he argued, are human inventions, constructs built by societies to control behavior, not eternal truths. This is the heart of his book Beyond Good and Evil, where Nietzsche dismantles the idea that morality is fixed, universal, or divinely ordained. Instead, he proposes a radical idea that values must evolve, must be created, not inherited. Most people find this idea uncomfortable. We want to believe that some things are unquestionably right or wrong, that morality is a kind of compass built into reality. But Nietzsche challenges this. He says, your morality is a product of your culture, your time, your class, your religion. It's not eternal, it's contextual. And that's why, throughout history, the definitions of good and evil have constantly changed. What was noble in one age is criminal in the next. What was taboo is later celebrated. Morality isn't truth, it's narrative. So what does this mean for power? It means that those who control the moral narrative control the culture, and those who question that narrative, who dare to think beyond good and evil, are often the ones with the clearest vision, but the most enemies. Nietzsche didn't deny that cruelty and injustice exist. What he denied was the idea that morality could be used as an absolute weapon, that one group could impose their values as the final word on human behavior. In his view, this is exactly what the worst people do. They hijack the language of morality to justify their domination. They don't rise because they're evil. They rise because they weaponize righteousness. They frame their greed as progress, their control as order, their dominance as virtue, and the crowd believes it because the crowd needs moral certainty. It craves black and white. It finds comfort in condemning the other side rather than questioning itself. But the thinker, the individual who sees clearly, understands that real power lies in questioning these categories, in asking, who benefits from this morality? Who gets silenced by it? Who decides what's good? This isn't moral relativism. Nietzsche wasn't saying anything goes. He was saying that truth isn't given, it must be earned. That values are not discovered, but created. That greatness requires breaking the mold, not to destroy, but to transcend. And that brings us to a profound challenge. When we reject conventional morality, what do we replace it with? Chaos? Nihilism? Nietzsche feared this danger. He called it the abyss, the moment when old values die but new ones are not yet born. It's the space where meaning collapses, where people lose direction. This is the spiritual crisis of modernity. We've outgrown the stories that once gave life meaning, but we haven't written new ones. And into this vacuum step the worst people, the opportunists, the ideologues, the tyrants. They offer ready-made meaning to the lost. They bring back simplistic moral codes, often regressive and oppressive, but comforting in their clarity. They promise certainty, and in a world afraid of the abyss, that promise is seductive. Nietzsche's answer was not to fall backward, but to leap forward, to create values rooted in life, in strength, in authenticity, to become value creators, not value followers. This, he believed, was the next evolution of humanity. He envisioned the Übermensch not as a dictator, but as an artist of the self, someone who lives with purpose, who forges their own meaning, who rejects borrowed truths and carves their own path. This is not easy. It requires courage, vision, discipline, and most of all, the willingness to walk alone. Because the moment you step outside conventional morality, you'll be judged, labeled, attacked. People will say you're dangerous, immoral, extreme. But Nietzsche's challenge is this: do you want to be accepted, or do you want to be free? To move beyond good and evil is not to abandon ethics, it's to reimagine them. To craft a life that is not governed by fear or shame, but by self-awareness and integrity. And maybe that's why the worst people often succeed. They are willing to step outside the rules. But the real task is not to imitate them, it's to go further, to rise above them, not by dominating others, but by mastering ourselves. If the worst people succeed by manipulating others, Nietzsche believed that true greatness comes from mastering the self. This isn't about self-control in the modern sense of discipline or restraint, it's something deeper, something existential. Nietzsche called it self-overcoming, the ability to transform oneself again and again into a higher version of who you are meant to be. It begins with a confrontation, not with society or your enemies or even your past, but with your shadow. The parts of yourself you deny, repress, or pretend don't exist. Your fears, your envy, your rage, your ego. Nietzsche believed that growth starts by facing these parts, not rejecting them, but integrating them. To overcome yourself is to stop outsourcing your worth. It's to stop blaming the world for your suffering. It's to accept that your power is not something to be found, it's something to be built. Most people avoid this. It's easier to find a villain, a scapegoat, a distraction. It's easier to be a victim than to take full responsibility. But Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch wasn't about being free from pain. It was about choosing how to respond to it, about using suffering as fuel. He wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. That chaos is your raw material, and if you avoid it, you never create. You just copy. You live by borrowed values, borrowed goals, borrowed dreams. But if you confront it, if you shape it, you can become something no one else is, a true individual." So how does one begin this process of self-overcoming? Nietzsche offers no step-by-step guide, because there isn't one. The path is different for everyone, but he gives us clues. First, he says we must become aware of our conditioning. All the inherited beliefs we carry from religion, school, family, media, that shape our identity without our consent. Most people never examine these beliefs. They live as if the values they were given at birth are unquestionably true. But Nietzsche says, question everything, especially the things that feel most sacred. Second, we must learn to endure solitude, not just physical solitude, but intellectual and moral solitude. The courage to hold beliefs that others find offensive, the strength to walk alone. This is not isolation, it's independence. Third, we must stop craving validation. Nietzsche saw this as one of the greatest prisons. If you live for approval, you will betray yourself. You will wear masks. You will dilute your truth. And eventually, you will forget who you are beneath all the performances. Fourth, we must embrace becoming. The idea that we are never finished, never static, never complete. The Übermensch is not a destination. It's a process, a continual unfolding, a daily decision to rise above who you were yesterday. But here's the paradox. This path does not promise worldly success. In fact, it often leads away from it, because the world rewards conformity more than truth, image more than depth, safety more than transformation. So why walk it? Because the alternative is spiritual death. A life of quiet resignation, of bitter envy, of suppressed dreams. Nietzsche believed that even if the world misunderstands you, even if you fail by conventional standards, living with authenticity is the only true victory. To overcome yourself is not to become someone else. It's to shed what you're not. It's to burn off the false layers and reveal something real, something original, something powerful. And that kind of power can't be faked. It doesn't come from followers or fame or wealth. It comes from alignment. When your actions match your values. When your life reflects your truth. When your voice is your own. This is the power the worst people can never touch, because their power depends on illusion, on manipulation, on the ignorance of others. But the power of the self-mastered individual? It's untouchable, because it's rooted in what no one else can take away, your will. So as we near the end of this journey, Nietzsche's message becomes clear. The world may elevate the worst. It may reward the fake. But your task is not to change the world, it's to transcend it. Become who you are, boldly, unapologetically, fearlessly, because in doing so, you don't just resist corruption, you reveal what's possible beyond it. Throughout this journey, we've explored why the worst people succeed, not because they're noble, but because they understand and wield the forces Nietzsche called the will to power. We've seen how morality is manipulated, how conformity rewards mediocrity, how masks matter more than meaning, and how the truly authentic are often punished for their courage. But now comes the final question, the most difficult of all. If the world is this way, what do we do with that knowledge? Nietzsche didn't want us to despair. He didn't write to make us bitter or cynical. He wrote to awaken something deeper, the will to create. The antidote to corruption isn't withdrawal, it's creation, and not just art or innovation, but the creation of a new kind of human being. Nietzsche believed that history was shaped by two kinds of people, the reactive and the creative. The reactive person is defined by resentment. They don't build, they tear down. They don't create, they critique. They live in opposition to others rather than in service to something greater. But the creative individual, they bring something new into the world, a new idea, a new standard, a new self. They don't wait for permission, they become the standard. This is Nietzsche's final and most powerful challenge. Can you become a creator of values? This means more than being different. It means daring to live by a code that didn't exist before you. It means embodying the very principles you believe the world needs: courage, depth, integrity, vision, even when the world rejects you for it. In the face of rising mediocrity, Nietzsche's answer wasn't retreat, it was elevation. He called for the birth of the Übermensch, not as a ruler, but as a radiant example of what a human could become if they lived without fear. To do this, we must first let go of what he called slave morality, the morality of safety, conformity, and resentment. Then, we must face the abyss, the collapse of external meaning, and not be consumed by it. We must find the strength to create meaning from within. This is not just a philosophical task, it's a psychological, emotional, and spiritual one. And it is not for the faint of heart. Because when you stop chasing approval, you will feel alone. When you stop believing inherited truths, you will feel lost. And when you step into the role of creator, you will feel exposed. But you will also feel alive. This is the existential fire Nietzsche tried to light beneath his readers, not to make them comfortable, but to make them burn, to push them beyond complacency into the dangerous, thrilling, and often painful process of becoming. He believed the modern world was sick, not from lack of knowledge, but from lack of courage. Courage to see, courage to speak, courage to act, courage to become. And that's where your journey begins, not with changing others, not with fixing the system, but with building yourself into someone who cannot be broken by it. This is the secret the worst people already understand. If you shape perception, you shape power. But Nietzsche's answer goes further. If you shape yourself, you shape the future. Because while the worst may succeed for a time, their power is hollow, their success is borrowed, their legacy is shallow. But the one who overcomes themselves, who creates new values, who lives as a beacon rather than a mirror, that person redefines what success even means. So if you've ever looked around and felt alien in this world, if you've ever questioned why truth is punished and deception rewarded, if you've ever burned with the desire to live deeper, speak clearer, rise higher, then Nietzsche's voice is calling you, not to follow him, but to surpass him, because that, ultimately, is what he wanted. Not worship, but transformation. You are not here to fit in. You are here to rise. You are not here to obey. You are here to overcome. The worst people may win the game, but you were born to change it.